Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Roseann. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm on a mission to change children's mental health and teach parents that you don't have to take medication just because a teacher tells you to. And today we're going to talk to Gail, who's a mom who sat in that seat across from the teacher. And when the teacher said, you should medicate your kid, we're going to find out exactly what Gail did, because she didn't do that and her children are thriving. So Gail, welcome. Okay. Tell us what happened in that moment. Like, what happened to you as a parent when your daughter was having a hard time in school and you met with your teacher? Paint the picture. Talk to us about what happened.
I mean, the whole thing really was a complete shock. We just went in for a typical, conference, had no indication whatsoever prior to that my daughter was experiencing any difficulties. So the whole thing came to a shock. I mean, and when the teacher had addressed it in the way where she had said that Sophie's struggling with comprehension and focus. And so my husband and I were just more like, that's common. Sophie tends to be sort of that stop and smell the roses kind of kid. She gets not easily distracted, but she, when she's walking out the door, something catches her eye, she would stop and look at it and be curious, and never paid mind to it that it was something bigger than that. So when she had mentioned that, I kind of was like, yeah, I see that. And she's like, no, it's more than that. So my antenna went up and I said, well, can you explain what does that mean? And she was just like, she really is struggling with reading comprehension and staying focused and really keeping her, up to speed with the rest of the class. So that's where I got a little concerned because I hadn't, seen it display itself that way. So I said, well, what do you do? What do you do in situations like this? How do you handle it? And her first immediate response was medication. And wow. In my brain, it was like a tire screeching, like a screeching halt. And I was like, whoa. And I remember in that very moment, I said, no, that's not my go-to. That's just not how I, lean.
Well, and let's be honest. First of all, I love that you were like, she's a stop and smell the, roses kind of kid. She's curious. We want curious kids, right?
Absolutely.
And Sophie was always, she's really good-natured. She gets along with others. She's well-liked, so there's nothing glaring going on. And it was, first of all, to be in a classroom and then be told your kid is having a hard time, which I've been there, is really hard, right? Really hard. And then for you to do the right thing by saying, what can we do? I'm sure you were thinking she was going to say, well, we can do a little extra work.
Tutor.
Tutor.
That's where I thought she was going, like a little extra help. But her first line of defense was medication.
Yeah.
And that threw me off guard. But I just, that's not my go-to stance in anything personally in my life. I just I'm a firm believer that there are alternative ways of thinking, of doing things. I myself am curious about those things. And I just thanked her. I said, okay, I need to, look into this on my own. And I wasn't going to say to her, take a hike, but I respectfully said, thank you. And went off and immediately got on the internet and started looking, just doing my own, diligence.
Yeah.
And
you became Google MD, Gail. That's what you're supposed to, you became Google MD. That's what you're supposed to do.
But I'm cautious about that too, because there's so many, wacky, you can go down these crazy rabbit holes of really bad misinformation.
You can, but there's also good information out there too. And
that's how I found you.
Yeah.
You came up, boom. And I started reading and it completely just resonated with me and is what I believe in. And
you are already a holistic person. You're somebody who leans towards holistic care and also getting to root causes. I think that's one of my favorite things about you. Yeah.
And I've just, my own self is, just learning over the years, taking care of myself, that, medication, where I'm not knocking it and I'm not saying I won't take it, is just, a Band-Aid. It just fixes the immediate symptoms, but what's causing it is I'm more curious about what's the root cause and why is this even happening? So
Yeah.
I don't want it to keep reoccurring. I want to eradicate it entirely.
Yeah. And so many
can.
parents sit in that seat, and some of them come in knowing there's problems. Sometimes it's the first time. And, in our state, as I told you, it's illegal for teachers to actually recommend medication to parents. It's against state law. Just a little FYI, Gail. But it didn't stop her, because she feels like that's her solution. Like, I think it's so empowering, and to know that you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. If for another parent who's in those shoes in that moment, what would you say to them? Because I think what happens is you become so afraid, right? But somehow you were like, there's going to be another way. You didn't go to the fear. What made you in that moment be like, wow, there's got to be another way? Was it something within? Like, what made you change your mind? Like, what would you say to another parent who was there at that moment? And maybe they've been told for 3 years their kid has a problem. Why should they choose something else?
Because I think it's like anything, we always look to the expert, whether it's the teacher, the doctor, and take the word as gospel. And I'm not saying that that's not the case in a lot of instances, but doctors can be wrong, teachers can be wrong, we're human. I just think I am my child's advocate. I need to do what feels right for me and my family. And to me, we weren't there yet. Like, why should that be? It's like saying she needs to go in for surgery. Her eyes are, go get her, whatever, surgery on her eyes. Like, I would never do that. Like, I would look to see would glasses, rectify the problem, or why would I immediately run to surgery? To me, that felt like the last resort instead of the first.
Yes. Can I say amen? Because that's absolutely the truth, And I love that you I know, seriously. And I love that you trusted yourself. Because I think the thing is like, you're a working mom. I'm a working mom. Most moms are working. We're overwhelmed. And the moment you hear something isn't quite right with your kid, like we get on that worry train. And, you didn't jump to that recommendation. You didn't not do anything. You were like, wait, okay, she's telling me there's a problem. Let me figure out something else.
I have to be honest.
Ignore it either,
had I just gone that route and started to, pop medication down her, that would have made me more worried than not. Again, and this is just my bend. This is how I lean, is medication to me is never the first line of defense.
Yeah.
And again, I've seen it do wonderful things for people. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have gotten there, but I would not want to just push medication down her throat without understanding what else what other options are available. That would worry me more. What would the side effects be long term? Would it, make her feel a certain way? Like, that's the last thing I want to do, is put a foreign substance down my child's throat into their bodies.
Well, and I'm so glad you're bringing that up, because we don't need to go there, but there are so many side effects, and we make it like even ADD meds, like it's nothing, like it's like a Skittle. You know what I mean? But, a colleague of mine, their a young adult sibling killed themselves after a very short amount of time on Adderall, right? Which is like, seems like nothing, diagnosed with, ADD as a teenager, boom, there you go. These things happen, not to be fearful. So you got to me, and we did a brain map, and really what happened in that process for you. And I can't wait.
This is what happened when I had my first call with you. After you read the brain map, my head exploded. It was, first of all, it was the most incredible validation that I was where I needed to be. What you picked up on, I mean, and I was a believer walking in, but that call with you just solidified 1,000 times over that this was it, because you hit on things that I was floored at that you would have identified from reading, the brainwaves. It was remarkable. I haven't stopped talking about it to so many people, that I work with and friends, colleagues, because it was mind blowing. It was mind blowing what came out of that session with you.
Well, and what
made
we
me
learned, this wasn't ADD, right?
No.
This wasn't
No.
ADD, right?
Mm-mm.
And there were some processing problems. And what we did some neurofeedback, we did some supplements, we did a little diet tweaks, nothing dramatic because you guys are already doing a lot of things. And Sophie's story is so ridiculously awesome. And we didn't even talk about Lance, but because of course the sibling has to come because Sophie tells her brother he's got to do this too, right?
That's not how. Yes, Sophie was like, she's like Miss Champion of it.
She is my champion because she feels awesome.
The very, very same teacher who raised this with me was tutoring my children this summer because I wanted them to continue with some sort of, education over the summer. So weekly they had, an hour session with her to just do math and reading to stay fresh. And at the end of the summer, she said to me, and she knew what I was doing for Sophie. She said, whatever you're doing for Sophie, you need to do for him because she's on fire.
I know, I remember that. Yeah.
He was just like blown away by the change that she had seen from when school ended and over the summer when Sophie was really doing the bulk of her sessions. She could not believe it was the same little girl.
And think about that impact, because I hope that teacher now doesn't tell people to medicate and she tells them about neurofeedback and other things because her mind has changed, right? You got her to understand there are other ways to regulate the brain. Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool.
Exactly.
So then Sophie enters a new school year, and talk about what happened to Sophie this year. Cause it's so awesome. It gets me very verklempt and I can start crying when we talk about it. Yeah.
Well, I did cry. I did actually cry because I had my first, that first annual, parent teacher conference, a couple of months now, I think. And her teacher is new to the school, so she didn't even know Sophie's former teacher. She herself just walked into the school, so had knew nothing, no knowledge of anything or anyone. And when I sat down with her, she started talking to me about, how well Sophie's doing, and then took out her notebook that they write in. She said, I just want to tell you that you won't be getting this back at the end of the year because I want to use this for future classes to demonstrate what good, looks like. And I started to well up and I started to cry. And she was looking at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
And I said, I have to stop for a minute and I have to explain why I'm reacting this way. And I told her, and I, reiterated to her what you and I were just speaking about. And she started to get emotional. And she said, I never, ever would have pegged Sophie as that child. She's like, she's unbelievable. She's coming up with things that I'm not even thinking of. She's just thriving. She's doing beautifully. She's now tutoring Lance in his studies because she's so passionate about what she's experienced and the changes. And she said to Lance, I can't explain, but I just feel different.
Yeah.
I can't explain it to you, but I just do. And he now undergoing, treatment with you. His struggle was, he couldn't find the words. He was tripping over his words quite a bit. And he was struggling with just getting it out. That's been eradicated. And he's only halfway through. I mean,
right.
he's able to articulate his thoughts. He has something to say, he says it, and he articulates it beautifully. And he said on the other day, coming to you, in fact, I said, are you noticing anything? He said, yes. And I said, with what? He said, with reading. And I said, in what way? And he said, I just understand it more when I'm reading. And I said, interesting. I said, what I pick up is the way you're able to articulate what you're feeling. Do you notice that you're not, struggling to find your words? And he said, yeah, that too. So, at their age, it's hard to sometimes articulate what it is you're experiencing, but they're getting it. So now he's all in. He was a little like, oh, I have to go. But now he's like, I want to go. We got Dr. Rose.
And your brain's going to work better. She was like our advocate, right? You know what I mean? And also, talk about the difference in Sophie's confidence, right? Because it's always really excited when your kid does better in school, but their emotional core and how they feel about themselves is what makes them successful for the rest of their life, not just in academics and work, but in relationships with others and being able to set boundaries with others. And, just when you love yourself, man, that's when the magic happens. So there was a shift in Sophie.
That was something you picked up on in the mapping was, she was an anxious kid. It was presenting itself quite a bit. And you picked up on that immediately. And you said, look, she's prone to being anxious, but it's to a level that wasn't to her benefit when we first started. And that was one of the first things I started to notice with her, because she used to lay in bed every night and start to ruminate over things and start really late at night, worrying about, to me, what felt like really silly things. But it was really taking hold of her. And very quickly upon starting with you, that started to dial back and really started to, come down. So I noticed that rather quickly. And then what has started to really happen is this confidence emerging. So fast forward to this year, and she came home and said, hey, we're running for student council this week in my grade. I think I might want to do it. And I was like, well, what? I'm like, that's awesome. She's like, I have to make a speech. I have to prepare a speech. She's like, I don't think I'm going to have time to do it because it's due in 2 days. And I said, whoa, we got this, girl. We can do this. And together we put together a presentation. Clearly it was her ideas and thoughts. I just helped sort of get it into a more eloquent, finished product. Yeah. But I was blown away by just the thoughts she had and the inclusiveness she felt strongly about projecting to her classmates and why she wanted to be part of this. She wanted people's voices to be heard. And, it was just really a beautiful moment for me to watch and witness. But the day so she presented that, and then she had to stand up to the class and present, which she came in that morning and she said, will you be angry if I don't do it? And I said, I would never be angry. Just the fact that you're even contemplating doing this is amazing. But let's take a step back here. Why don't you want to do it? And she said, I'm nervous. I'm worried. I have to stand in front of people for a minute and a half and make this presentation. And I said, totally normal. I still get nervous when I have to make presentations. That's a very common feeling, but let's pull back again and let's just look at this in the big picture. I said, it's either a minute and 30 seconds of feeling a little uncomfortable and nervous versus sort of a lifetime of regret. Because I think you're not doing this, and given how much preparation you put in and how hard you worked all weekend rehearsing and practicing and, repeating this over and over, a minute, 30 seconds or months of regret. What's it going to be?
What's harder?
And she looked at me, she's like, that's a great point. She's like, I'm going to do it. And she did. And she won with flying colors, I was told. Yeah. And she's just blossoming before our very eyes. And it's just,
she carries herself differently. You know what I mean? Like when I would first talk to her, there'd almost, you could see the hand movements of a little worry. And now she just kind of beams and is who she is probably where at home, but everywhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Little things though, like eye contact. You know, we were at a party, and I noticed, I wasn't saying anything because we were at the event, and she turned to me. I was noticing that the young woman, an adult, was talking to this young woman, and she wasn't making eye contact with the individual, and it felt really awkward to me. And Sophie leaned into me and she said, why isn't she looking at him in the eye? And it was just an astute observation for a 9-year-old. And I said to her, like, it's critical when, no matter how uncomfortable it is, if someone's addressing you and talking to you, you need to look them in the eye. It's the right thing to do. But she picked up on it on her own. And it's just, again, an unbelievable transformation.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, so many proud mama moments there, right? That she's, recognized there's a hurdle, right? And that, okay, and what a beautiful reframing that you said 90 seconds of uncomfortableness versus months of regret, right? And there are moments that we're going to be uncomfortable in life, and that's perfectly normal, and you normalize that. But even to just want to do that and all those changes, but also just to think about, that moment, I know was such a big moment for you when the teacher said, oh, we're going to be using her notebook as the example for the other students for next year. And, how emotional that was. And like, what a huge, huge deal for you and Sophie. Like, I mean, this is somebody who was really behind and people were concerned about and offered medication, and how easy the process of neurofeedback is. Everyone always makes it like it's a hard thing.
Oh, yeah. They're watching a movie.
I know. Right? Plus everybody's so darn nice around here. You know what I mean?
They love coming, and they talk about it. They're always talking about The Office. Oh, Lance got a toy because he completed his, halfway mark. They're just happy. They're happy. Yeah. They feel good. They see the output from their hard work. Sophie's bright. I mean, her scores came back. She's excelling in her studies now. Lance is getting there, and he's not far behind. It's just been an enormous win-win. I thank my lucky stars every day that I, left that room and got on, the web and found you. I mean, I can't even.
Well, and the thing is that you have to be proud of yourself, because we all sit down at one moment or another with our kids at some point in their developmental time where they're with us, and there's going to be a challenge. And it's in those moments that you decide, what's important, how am I going to manage this? And the magic happens in the behaviors, right? So I regulated their nervous systems, but even in that moment, Gail, you sat down in a life moment and you weren't like, you're going to do it because I worked on this speech with you for 2 days. You were like, hey, here's your options. It's up to you. And there's a little bit of uncomfortableness, and it's normal. So you're like a wonderful partner in this. We just took their Ferraris with bicycle brakes and we put the right brakes on and gave a little bit of a tune-up to these beautiful babies and had their brain regulate, right? Because when their brain, as we talked about, if it's over or understimulated, it just can't work with efficiency. And when the brain works with efficiency and you take away stress, you can fly. And their story is your kids are, again, very happy, well-adjusted kids. They just were younger kids moving in a trajectory where all of a sudden the other kids, things were a little easy. Not everybody, but the majority start getting a little easier, and the processing became harder for them. And now you get to see how different it is, right? Your kids are just beautiful, typical kids. Sophie's going to be like, I don't know, she's going to be something special. I'm just going to tell you, because she's like got that mother quality, you know what I mean? Like she's a nurturer, she, not that Lance isn't awesome, but
different,
totally different, right? Totally. She could be CEO of something. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
She's a force to be reckoned with, but it's really interesting watching her teach Lance because, he hasn't caught up
Matured.
yet.
Yeah, he hasn't matured.
Yeah,
He's younger. Just to know about Lance. He's younger. And
by 2 minutes.
Even in the conversation that I had with him, by two, right. But he has that different level of maturity about
he's
him.
a boy.
But he is. But he's catching up. He's catching up. I saw that interplay in the last time I was with him, and I was like, "Who is this kid?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He was upset because they got their first, scores back from the standardized tests that they, apply several times throughout the year.
Yeah.
And the reading went up. His math is getting there, but not where he wants it to be. And Sophie's was through the roof this time. And he was really upset. And he was crying. He said, I don't even want to know the score. I said, the score is not important, nor is it important that you didn't hit where you want to be. What's important is we now know what we need to target. I said, mistakes are the best things to happen. I want you to make mistakes and get things wrong because then we know how to address and what to address. So forget that, you didn't do as well. You did great. Now we have what to work with. And I challenged Sophie. I said, I gave them a little, dare, not a dare, but like bribe, I guess. And I said, look, if you can work with Lance and get him to help him achieve a certain level, you both win because you're helping what you love to do. Lance, you're getting what you need and you don't want to, have extra help. So let's see what you two can do together. I mean, you're both on the same level and the same grade. You have that relationship. It's remarkable. I mean, Sophie is putting in such effort and making up questions and preparing like she's a teacher. It's crazy. And they sit every night, and I have on a board, they have to do 5 days a week, 15 minutes a day. It's become a little bit of a game, and they sit at the table and she does her lesson plan with him. And you know what? I hear it. He's getting it. Yeah. He's so appreciative of her, help.
How wonderful is that?
And it's just like a really fun thing.
Because so many times, and first of all, I just want to commend you on the way that you handled that, because when nobody should be perfect, and yes, we learn from mistakes. That's nobody gets everything right, and we have to stop putting that kind of pressure on ourselves and our kids that everything's going to be 100%. I mean, who does that? I don't do things at 100%. And I tell everybody all the time, I do so much stuff and I get so much out there because I don't expect anything to be perfect. I expect it to be very good.
How boring would that be?
Well, I would be scared to do anything. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you going to do? Right. And you could have everything be perfect and it's still not going to be right for somebody and somebody's going to criticize it. But you gave your kids permission, but then you also taught them it's a learning opportunity. And I think that's what we're forgetting. And you just did such a great job. And instead of making our kids feel less than, it made them feel more than.
I don't like the competitiveness that exists today.
I know.
And the last place I wanted it was in my house amongst them. And I had noticed about oh, I'm working on mine. You can't look. I don't like that. Let's use this as a moment to lift each other up and help everybody exceed. And I always say then perfection doesn't exist, so let's eradicate that from our way of thinking. And you never, ever want to be the smartest kid in the room or person in the room. I mean, that's not fun. There's always something to learn, not that you want to be the least, brightest person in the room, but you certainly don't want to be the smartest person in the room. And I never have to worry about that because I'm surrounded by insanely intelligent people, but I love that because it stretches me. And I want the same for them. I want them to understand that, because his first mode was to be upset and cry and he wasn't good enough. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, you're doing great. We will get you there. You'll get there. Just give yourself a break. Give yourself.
And you broke it down so that it was achievable. And just like when, my youngest is dyslexic and, he's very easy, but, naturally he would get upset because the reading was incredibly hard for him. And a million times I would say, Mommy didn't just get a doctorate, buddy. Less than 5% of the population in the United States has a PhD. You have to work, and I would just say it and say it and say it and show it and reinforce it. And you know what happens? He's above grade level in reading. So, hey, that's what happens. But it didn't happen overnight.
It never does.
No, it never does. So, I mean, it's so beautiful to hear that your kids are so happy and they're thriving, right? And I think the biggest takeaway is when your teacher sits down with you and says, hey, go and do this. I think we listen, but you are in charge. If somebody recommends medication to you, whether it's your friend or your doctor or your mother-in-law or your spouse, that should never be the first option when it comes to children.
What does your gut say? I mean, listen to your voice. Like my inner voice, my alarm bells immediately went off. And I was like, thank you. No, thank you. I got it. I was, like I said, I was very respectful, but I was in my head, I was like, no way.
Yeah. I think you called me like literally the next day.
That day I found you. I came home, but that's me. I'm like, get
it done kind of girl,
But it was just like, I heard that. And I the guilt I felt for almost, I felt very guilty that I had always coined it as Sophie was like a stop and smell the roses kind of kid. I had tremendous guilt for not seeing what it really was. And that's why I snapped immediately into action. Like, whoa, this is way more than what I had thought, which is why I put all my attention to it immediately. And it's so easy when I say this all the time. You can only connect the dots looking back. And, here's the deal. She was happy. Nobody had ever really expressed any concerns. Both my kids are very curious kinds of kids, very different kinds of kids. Curiosity is an amazing thing. We want our kids to be curious because it leads to trying things, and trying things leads to critical thinkers. And people complain about motivation in their kids, but motivation happens when kids have failures and opportunities and have to problem solve. And I think there's a real decrease in critical thinking. There's an increase in people just following curriculum, but the moment something goes off track. So, I'm hearing so many beautiful things happening with how you parent, the way your kids are, and that they're loving themselves. They're making opportunities for themselves, and they're making messes too. As they should, because they're kids. So for anybody who has a child, whether it's, a formal diagnosis like ADHD or anxiety, whatever's going on, or you just have some concerns, what would you tell somebody who's considering working with us in our program? What has been your experience, and what would you want people to know why they should do it? My gosh, the list is endless. My advice is run and pick up the phone and make the call and hightail it in there. It's the most mind-blowing, in the best sense of the, what that means. It's just been exponentially advantageous to my children and their well-being. They're just there's not an ounce of, I can't even articulate it. It's just a beautiful thing to be part of, to witness, to see. They're thriving. They're enjoying life in a way I just never imagined. It's just hands down the best decision I've ever made.
That's pretty amazing. And thank you. I feel so grateful that I feel privileged that you brought your family to us, because you guys are pretty darn special human beings. And for you, the process of, a Q, which was such a learning opportunity for you. But as you said, neurofeedback in itself is easy. Like, people sometimes think it's going to be hard. And you came and drove. Some people come and do remote sessions, but it was easy. It's easy for your kids. it's easy for you, and it's time limited. You don't do it forever.
The time in that office, the 30 minutes you spend it's fun. I mean, look, I started doing it because I was like, give me some of that. Who wouldn't want it? It's the most relaxing 30 minutes. You're literally, I mean, is it hard for me? Of course, I'm a full-time working parent. I have to leave work early. I literally pass your office to come home to get my kids to then drive 30 minutes back.
Yep.
It's worth every ounce of stress and whatever it causes my day to give them those 30 minutes that will change their life forever. So that is, I'll push through that. And I have pushed it. I would, travel 3 hours to get to you to give them those 30 minutes, knowing what it does for them. Honestly, I think it would be harder to get them to swallow a pill or a gross flavored, we all know what agony that could be to get them to take, medicine that they can't stand, versus they never moan about, they talk about, oh, what movie am I going to watch next? They're watching a movie. So there's no.
Well, and your kids are a joy to have there. And, and I also think sometimes people, for me, you are somebody who, you're like me. I'm like, oh, here's the problem. I'm going to do this, right? You know what I mean? And, sadly, like I have, many of our staff, as you're well aware, are our former clients. And, I got just even on a staff level, the journey that they experienced. For example, my dyslexic, we got him reading help right out of the gate. Like he never had anything but dyslexic reading help because we knew. And in the case of our staff, they knew too, but then they couldn't get the right kind of help, right? For whatever reason or another. And then what happens to when you don't get the right help, doesn't matter if it's dyslexia or anxiety or ADHD, you develop secondary problems. You develop anxiety and depression and teenager substance abuse, and it leads to you feeling like garbage about yourself. So if there's one takeaway, it's, of course, there's so many takeaways here. Listen to your mother gut, don't lead to, don't start with medication. Absolutely not. There are natural solutions that science, shows that work, and don't wait. Right? There's a problem, and I think the thing about mental health, right, is that, hold on. I think the thing about mental health is that it's not like a broken leg that you can't ignore, right? You think you can't ignore, but when you ignore mental health, it bites you in the butt every time, right?
Yeah. So if someone was diagnosed with, a formal medical, like you're saying, whether a broken leg or, God forbid, cancer, you wouldn't sit and let it idle. You would be on that thing so fast. And this is no different.
Yeah, it is. So you should be super proud of yourself and your kids. Your kids are awesome. And all I did, like I said, is, their brake pads wore out and tuned them all up, and they're just beautiful human beings. And I think that's the part about neurofeedback. Like it just shines your assets, right? It turns off those things that shouldn't be there, and it improves what's there, and in your own experience, it makes you feel pretty lovely.
Yeah. I mean, you said it on the first call. You said, I forgot, you said something to the effect of, we're going to get her running like a Ferrari. And yeah.
She's running like a Ferrari.
You did. It's exactly. I don't remember what you said prior to that. You said she's running like something, but we're going to get her running like the Ferrari.
Yeah, I said she's running like a used Honda, and we're going to get
like a Pinto, an old Pinto.
It's like a good and reliable car, but you can't take it on long trips because it's too old. You know what I mean? Now we're getting her running, and like I said, the most important part, it's awesome. When schoolwork is easier, that's your job. You're going to feel better about yourself, and you just get to see that. And I love what it's done for not that they didn't get along before, because they really did, but I love that they have that trust. You've created this beautiful sacred space within your family that the siblings can really trust each other to help each other learn. And that's a testament to you and the way that you parent. So, thank you so much. But thank you for sharing. And, for any parent out there that's struggling, what I say all the time is just take one action, be consistent with it. Don't expect a miracle to happen overnight, and really lean into what's working and keep doing that work. And certainly if you're a distressed parent, you've got to calm yourself first. Your kids co-regulate off of you, and that means you've got to share your calm. And, it's so hard when your kid is struggling, but when you start with one thing and being consistent, that's when the magic happens. But
trust the process.
Mm-hmm. And just know there's going to be some, healing doesn't look like a rocket ship. It's like it's a stock market that's trending up, but with some lots of variability in there. But, neurofeedback makes it a lot easier because your brain regulates. That's just the bottom line, Yeah. So, Miss Gail, I appreciate you on so many levels. I was so looking forward to this and really excited and very, very grateful that you have become part of our family. And, everybody, of course, adores you and the kids. And thank you so much for having an impact on hopefully thousands of other families who are struggling, and educating them about, what neurofeedback is and why we should say no to a teacher who recommends medication. Wherever you are in your journey is exactly where you need to be. Sending everybody a lot of love and light.